Hi there and welcome everyone to a new episode of the Ultimate Supply Chain Podcast Season 2. Our mission in this podcast, as you know, is to answer your supply chain burning questions with our expert guests to give you valuable insights and answer those questions you have. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by David Sheldon. He's a global supply chain leader with over 20 years of experience in FMCG businesses. David specialises in strategy, innovation and capability building, and more recently he's been involved in massive digital transformation and people development. His work in the supply chain and his role in developing and implementing cutting-edge practices have made him a recognised thought leader in our industry. David, it is brilliant to have you with us today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Lou. It's a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to it.
David, can I start by asking you about the whole brand in a box trend that we've started to see in FMCG businesses? In your experience, what do you see as the supply challenges and the differences between those various channels?
Yeah, it's a good one. The brand in the box typically can mean having what we have on shelf and then putting that into an e-commerce environment in a box, brand in a box and sending it off. Or it can also mean having something which is much more customized and personalized towards the consumer and shopper. And the two are quite different naturally and also require different supply chain responses. But I also want to bring it all the way back to classic FMCG, whereas sometimes we talk about brand in a box, we mean brand in a shop or brand in a supermarket or brand in another type of outlet as well. So for me, it can be quite a wide range of the different channels. And I think it's important anybody working or interested in working in FMCG understands that what's called omni-channel approach and structure to the industry. So we have many successful and popular brands, but each one of those has to work well, whether it's at a local convenience store, whether it's in one of the discount chains, whether it's in one of the major supermarkets, or whether you're selling through pure play retailers, or also you're operating your own direct-to-consumer business as well. So important to think about those different channels and the different challenges they have when we talk about brand in a box.
And what is the key challenge of keeping that omni-channel experience across those points of contact, I suppose? What are the key challenges around keeping that consistent? Because ideally, when a brand is purchased, you want the same purchase experience and the same brand experience at each point, right?
Correct. And it isn't a one-size-fits-all thing. So if you're operating in the US, if you're operating in Europe, if you're operating in China, if you're operating in Latin America, you will have different starting points, goes without saying. I think the key thing to recognize with the supply chain is its critical role in customer centricity. And in essence, that means, is the product available on shelf or online when the consumer shopper wants to buy it? Is it available at a reasonable price? The right price point, very important. Is it available in a sustainable way as well? Another thing to get right. And also, is it available in a way where we can continually deliver on the promise of the brand? And that can mean different things, whether it's a jar of coffee, a bag of pet food, or a customized chocolate gift, for example. So they're the high level things to think about for sure.
So I guess in your experience and in the roles that you've performed over your time in the supply chain industry, you're kind of in the middle of that, aren't you? You are bringing brands to customers, but not owning those brands. Yeah. And I'm guessing that means that, I mean, where'd you start with that? Where'd you start around knowing what the customer preferences are? First of all, in terms of that brand promise, what is it they're looking for? What are their expectations of a brand? But also in terms of channel, how do you get to grips with that?
Yeah, you have to, supply chain's great for this. Because in most organizations, you're encouraged to be inside your silo, be inside your box, if you like. Supply chain's not like that. To actually perform effectively, you have to really start thinking about what do I need to do to collaborate well with my sales, marketing, commercial colleagues? Am I ensuring I'm getting the numbers right for my finance and control colleagues, and so on? So this plays out very strongly here. And supply chain is a key partner in that customer centricity. Is the brand available? Is it the right price? Are we doing it sustainably? So I think the challenge is, as a supply chain person, you've got to ask yourself, okay, I'm doing the right thing in my function.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also doing the right thing cross functions. So that's again, it's an interesting way to look at it. Now, specifically, you asked me about how do you get to know what your consumer, shopper, customer wants. We do have to work closely with our sales and marketing colleagues here and make sure that we're both influencing any market research they're doing or customer engagement research they're doing, and making sure we're asking the right questions and also listening to the answers and making effective changes to help deliver the product, literally deliver the product to the consumer and the customer. So you have to be part of the process.
And in your role, typically, to what extent do you get involved in commissioning research? Is that something you've done?
No.
Okay.
Yes and no. I think typically for the bigger retailers and those channels which are more traditional, if I can call them that, and I don't mean they're old-fashioned, I just mean more traditional for an FMCG, that particular piece of it is kind of well known and well understood. We need to refresh and review regularly. But we also have to be able to, as a supply chain, be able to zoom down with our commercial colleagues and our customers and ask them, what is it we need to do better in the future? What can we collaborate on? Where can we make a difference so that the shopper, when she comes to reach for the product, it's available, or when she comes to scroll for the products on an e-commerce platform, it's available, and so on. Now, I think what is interesting in some of the newer, less traditional channels, such as direct to consumer, we have a much bigger role to play. What do I mean by that? Is the supply chain needs to be able to say, look, here's what we can do in terms of a lead time, and that affects how long it takes for a product to arrive to a customer. Here's what we can do in terms of customization and personalisation. And that can give our commercial colleagues opportunities to create unique products that are only available online. But we do need to understand what's important for the consumer and shopper and what are the market conditions. And that varies widely. So it's almost, you do need to take it as a case-by-case scenario. But again, be in the conversation, ask the right questions, and also challenge some assumptions as well.
That's fascinating. How mature, in your opinion, is this thinking, David? How are your typical customers coming to you and asking you for insights, or are they coming to you and giving you insights that they want you to respond to?
It's a full range. You have some very proactive customers. We're not just complaining about my delivery's late. Product's not on the shelf. We're actually much more proactive in terms of here's how we can work together for a better outcome for the consumer and shopper. So you have different ends of the scale. I think if you're a leading brand, and I've typically worked at leading brands such as Nestle, you're expected actually as part of the conversation to bring your insights and knowledge to it, whether that's on a shopper category basis or whether that's on a, look, here's what we can do together on a sustainability basis, here's what we can do to improve the packaging and so on. So we see it as much as a multi-level discussions need to go on with your customers. And that's fine when you're talking to a Walmart or a Carrefour or a Tesco's of the world, because they have an organization as well. But it can be more difficult with smaller players and more difficult when you're thinking about the consumer. You don't have that kind of interaction you can have. So you do have to think about it carefully.
Customer expectations of large brands such as Nestle and DHL Supply Chain is that we invest in understanding based on the experience we have and the impact we have right across the industry. Where is that insight taking us, and what value can that add to the consumer to start making decisions about inventory placement, even about things such as what their transport needs are, frequency of delivery, frequency of refresh, those sorts of things. And increasingly, that's becoming an expectation rather than a value add that they're delighted where they get it. Are you finding the same sort of thing?
Correct. And to build on that, I think there's also, you have to make sure you're bringing credibility. Yeah. Because who's going to listen to your advice if your performance just in the day-to-day operational sense isn't where it needs to be? So I always, especially somebody who's worked in development and transformation for many years, I always have to caution myself and my colleagues and say, well, will we be credible in front of the customer? Is it, I think it's the same in your operation. Almost frustratingly, in a way, you're only as good as your last month's performance, your last week's delivery, and that's again a critical thing to get right every day. And supply chain plays a huge role in that. So bring that credibility. Yeah.
Yeah, and looking at the whole profile of logistics and supply chain management, I think in the past this has been quite an operational business, and the KPIs tended to be quite hindsight based.
Yeah.
So it's, did you have stuff on shelves at the right time? Did things get delivered in the right way? All of the KPIs around safety and time-based fulfillment. Increasingly, although those things are absolutely essential, we're also seeing not only hindsight measures, but a requirement for foresight measures. Based on that hindsight, what might we predict for the future, and what might that do in terms of how we fulfill operational requirements of the future? So, where perhaps in the past this has been an operations game, for me in the future, this is a data game. This is an analytics game. And the pressure on understanding predictive analytics increasingly, it's going to be huge.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I've seen in my many years in the industry is that everything's been transformed with technology. Of course, stupid thing to say, but specifically now you're getting to the stage where we can have access to data we've not had access before.
Yeah.
We've got the computing capabilities to analyze it in a way, but then we still need to be able to take action in a meaningful way, which will make a difference on the shelf, online, and at home when the consumer comes to choose those products. So I think that step change in the technology, that's only going to increase. I encourage any lucky people who are going to start working in the supply chain to take that data analytics seriously and to make sure you're using it to make good decisions. It doesn't take away all the other good stuff we do. It just adds to it and it emphasizes it.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how that's changed? Because, only a few years ago, data was there to prove we'd done a good job.
Yeah.
And now it feels like data will help us do a better job in the future. And that's the expectation.
Yeah.
It's amazing how all of that has changed. Just to move the conversation forward a bit, David, thinking at segment level, what are your experiences of the benefits that things like customization and personalisation can bring?
Yeah. And it's fascinating for FMCG, especially old established businesses like Nestle, Procter & Gamble, Unilever, and so on, because there you have an entire business model which was very successful for many decades, built around scale, built around getting the products to as many outlets as possible, ensuring the brand is present, and so on. The growth, the boom in e-commerce over the last 15, 20 years has really step changed that now, both in terms of consumer, shopper and customer expectations. And personalisation, customization is a thing. And it's a thing where you can add value, you can create opportunities, you can really make your product speak to the consumer in an individual way. It means more complexity, of course, because now we have potentially millions of consumers and segments compared to perhaps a handful in the past. Mm-hmm. On the other side of it, again, it still works in store. Increasingly, our retail customers are saying, great, we love your product, but can we have products which are more suited to our shoppers? And that could be a different format pack. It could be a different case pack. Now, that seems a little dry in terms of, well, so what is that segmentation? But when you're having to do it at scale, for discounter channel, for convenience channel, for the out-of-home channel, and for the supermarket channel, again, these are complex problems for the supply chain to solve. So the good news is the supply chain is getting better. The bad news is demand is increasing and expectations are increasing all the time.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I'm a bit embarrassed to say I love a bit of personalisation. So I was given let's just call it generically a yeast extract product with my name on it for Christmas, and I've nearly run out of it because I'm a bit obsessed with said product, and I'm tempted to refill the package from Personalisation is a thing, and it's a thing not only, as you say, to have your name on it, but also to have your individual requirements fulfilled in that way. Have you got any examples which are kind of perhaps more human centric?
Yeah, no, I've spent quite a bit of time talking with sales commercial colleagues about, not everything needs to be customized or personalized. It's okay. But if you're going to do
it's relevant, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
It feels personalised and relevant. The fact that stuff had my name on is neither here nor there.
Yeah, but you've got to pick the right way to do it. You've got to play in a way which kind of, let's say you're like, oh, that's good. I've got my name on the bottle. Like, wow. So you've got to create the model, I think, which is sustainable and encourages you to come back and shop with me and not with somebody else. So I think that we can get into subscriptions and what that means in a second. I think there's some great areas to do it. I think there's the health, nutrition and wellness area is interesting.
Yeah.
Your vitamins, your supplements.
Yeah.
So if maybe you're like me, you're a old guy with grey hair, you have different vitamin supplement needs than perhaps a 25-year-old who's, bodybuilder. Of course you do.
Yeah.
And we can give you specifically the products that work best for you. So I think there's opportunities there. I think gifting's a great place for this. And it's done well at the moment, where you can have your name on the box, you can have a customized package, you can have a customized selection, whether it's a box of chocolates for Mother's Day or whether it's a health and beauty product. So I think there's some really interesting areas. But just press pause and think about the experience for the consumer needs a lot of alignment. You've got to get the web front right. You've got to get the data right. You've got to get the right products in the right place. You've got to be flexible and agile enough to pull it all together. So it still needs a real piece of operational orchestration, if you like, to make that happen.
Yeah, and getting back to what we were discussing a moment ago around collecting customer data and customer insight, for me, there is nothing worse than a poor collection of data, which then translates into almost a kind of cheap version of segmentation. So I answered those three questions. So I'm a woman in my 50s.
Yeah.
Don't like that. I like to feel that the data collection was personal, even though I'm aware that you're putting me into that segment.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how that whole customer journey has an impact on the brand that you will end up purchasing.
Yep.
The data collection and the brand are inextricably linked.
Yeah.
And I guess one of the points I find fascinating is at what point you do the customization. I mean, you made the point a moment ago. Maybe the customization just needs to be in the packaging, and the product itself is segment based.
Yep.
So you're kind of ticking all the boxes in slightly different ways.
It is. It's a bit of a zoo, and I mean that in a good way, because we go to a zoo and we quite like, look, the great apes, they're interesting, but look, the lions, they're interesting. So again, it isn't a one size fits all, and you need to carefully think it through. Now, at the same time, you've got the economic pressures, which are, is it profitable? Is it scalable? Are we making the most of our assets? Is it sustainable? So you have to bring the two together and make it work. So it isn't straightforward. And I've been involved in many discussions and initiatives and projects around, are we going to do it at the end of the production line in the factories?
Yeah.
Well, it depends. There's positives and negatives. Factories are very good at making things at volume, at large scale, like the predictability. Oh, okay. Are we going to do it in a subsequent dedicated customization fulfillment facility? Maybe. That could be interesting if it's in the right place, because if you're dealing with shorter lead times, it needs to be in the right place. So again, that's another. Or are we going to repurpose some of our existing warehousing and logistics facilities where all the brands are now and make them multi-channel, the kind of combination of regular order picking and consumer fulfillment sites, if you like, as well. So unfortunately for the listeners, there's not a simple answer, but I always encourage people, start with the consumer, work back, check the numbers, understand the profit and loss, understand where you can really add value and what's important and perhaps what's not so important, but very much being on the conversation from the start. There's nothing worse for an operations person to have to help
Oh,
a
add something in
commercial
at the last minute.
that's already decided. It's like,
Uh,
okay, we can only do this. Yeah,
yeah.
that's the challenge.
So inevitably, when you're doing something of that nature, there's tension. There's
Yeah.
tension because there's different stakeholders. Are you seeing any particular additional tension by the quite understandable demand for sustainable solutions? For me, it's always a bit of, oh, I love this customized box, but actually, what's that just cost the environment? Is
Yeah.
that something you see? How are people balancing those needs?
In my we do where I've been working, and we always give the customer what he or she wants.
Mm-hmm.
But we also need to start saying, is it sustainable? Can we start this process or reimagine this product, this experience in a sustainable way? Sometimes that can be about encouraging shoppers, customers to buy in the right
Mm-hmm.
quantity. Sometimes that's about them understanding, we might repackage it differently. We might need to deliver it differently as well to make that work. Or it can be even I was involved in a great example where we actually looked at the expectations for delivery lead times. This was in a direct-to-consumer case. And you can imagine, if you want it tomorrow, that's a whole different, especially DHL, the experts, that's a whole different way of doing it than if you're happy to accept it in 72 hours or next week. So, good. But the point is, never just be reactive, always be proactive. And the result of that piece of research we did was actually people were more interested in knowing for sure, will you deliver it on Thursday morning rather than can you deliver it next day in that case. So that allowed us to then rethink what the supply chain could do and how it could be more sustainable and make 72-hour delivery a sustainable option for people.
That's got a massive impact in terms of what you need to, but in terms of what you have to know about the customer to make those decisions, that's huge.
Yeah. And we can go to another level because we're saying to our commercial, okay, so if we offer 72-hour delivery, do we charge for 24-hour delivery? Yeah. And that's not a yes or no answer. That's like, okay, let's think that through. And what does that mean over the total lifetime value of that shopper, for example? So I think the thing is, and to do that effectively, you need to understand your consumer, customer, shopper. You need to know your own numbers. And you also need to be confident in your capabilities and your partner's capabilities. I think that's the other thing, which needs to be clear here. Is it doable?
I think you said a moment ago it's chicken and egg. And as you were just giving that example, I was thinking about this whole trend that we're seeing around subscription services.
Okay.
And I mean, clearly, there's a lot of engagement with customers and there's the opportunity for lots of customization. What are you seeing in terms of benefits to the supply chain?
Yeah, if you get your subscription model right, it's a big positive. Why is it a big positive? Well, it kind of gives you a preview of what's going to happen next week. If you capture the order and the subscription is a regular fulfillment order, gives you opportunities to optimize your fulfillment processes in a warehouse fulfillment center, which is good. Make sure you've got the right products, the right people in place. Also allows you to think carefully through your lead times and how do you optimize your transport, reduce your footprint, so you improve your sustainability. And you can also have a more reliable delivery if that's what's required from the consumer, the shopper. So there's positives around the organization like that. I think for subscription models as well, they're a great way of tying in the consumer and shopper to you.
Sticky, isn't it?
Yeah, you can doing it in a sensible way. You can upsell, you can gather interesting data, you can make good insights. So I think there's a way of forming that relationship with a shopper and a consumer, which perhaps in the past, as you say, they were aggregated into age and location and shopping behaviors rather than who you are individually. So that's all good. They're all positives. The negatives of a subscription is you've got to keep it going. So you have to make sure your quality of your fulfillment, your delivery, which is a key part of the subscription. I know many subscription models, one of the main grumbles is it wasn't delivered when I wanted it.
Yeah.
wasn't in the condition I wanted it. So you have to keep the quality high, keep your
Yeah.
focus on that.
Pressure.
It's always there. And then the other one for me is also when you want to change something, you want to change a delivery routine or you want to change the labeling, please, please, please take time and get it right. Because it takes a small thing, misplaced label, changing your packaging, and all of a sudden your subscription model either doesn't pay, is very unpopular with your target audience, and doesn't work nearly as well as good. So you've got to, once you've created it, you've got to really look after it and nurture it.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because to have the flexibility of customization, you've got to have the standardization that comes with a really solid foundational operation.
Yeah. And nearly
you can't
always
have one without the other.
No. And again, I speak with marketing, sales, commercial colleagues. It's like, we've got a great idea. Great. How can I help you? You get me involved early. And of course, naturally, you're going to start small. And to start small means manual. It means a little bit sticky tape and stapler the thing together. It means, have you got the right partner? So you have to have a plan. If it works, we know it works because of these things. It's successful, it's growing. How do we scale into something else? When we can start using slicker fulfillment, maybe automation, we can start standardizing some of our interfaces and data sharing and so on. So you always have to start, especially in operations, we like thinking about, okay, what next? If this takes off, how are we going to do that? You always have to have that in mind. How do we go from the launch to the, it's scaled, to the, now it's gone big.
Yeah. And around that scaling, in e-commerce, can you offer any tips for scaling and technology enabler that you found to be successful? Because you're absolutely right. Doing it once is okay. I was about to say easy, but I'm not going to say that. Doing it once is okay. Doing it many times in many different ways is something else. What have you found to be successful?
Okay. Get your own data right first before you start complaining about other people's data. Boring as it is, absolutely not boring. It's essential. Right address, right, where do you drop it off? Have you got the right detail? If you're allowed to do a substitution, are you clear on get your data right first. And the data changes and evolves. So have a strong process to review that data, be clear on who owns what piece of the data, and make it part. You can also make it part of the consumer journey, updating your data as well. So that's good. So get that data right. And the other thing is, have you got the right partners? Whether it's fulfillment partners, delivery partners, IT partners, are they the right partners? And they may be the right partners for stage A, but not the right partners for stage B. And can they grow with you, or do you need to look for other types of partners, and be clear that is the natural way of how you evolve, but start with the right partners. Also, I think there's a lot more we can do on standardization. Have we got the right, even just printing the label in the right way every day is a challenge. Exchanging data consistently and accurately is a challenge. So I think there's a lot more opportunity for standardization. I think also, and this is critical, the final one I'll make here is you've got to invest in your people and your talent, because it's new for us. It's probably new for them.
Definitely. Different way of thinking, isn't it?
Yeah. Every subscription model is in the subscription model category, but is unique for that consumer shopper product combination. So you have to make sure you're bringing your people along, getting the right people, developing them, understanding the role they play, and so on. And also, and I would say this as an old school operational person, don't underestimate the details, like the labeling. Is that right? What's the delivery experience like? Well,
that's what lets you down. It's always those things, isn't it?
Yeah. So get the details right. It's something I always caution. A successful subscription model is not just about a slick website. That's just the entry point. It's about the whole journey beyond that. And operations.
So in a weird sort of way, being able to be flexible relies on you being stable, and that's what we were saying a moment ago. Stability comes with reliability, which comes to solid operational.
Yeah. Saying all that.
Same thing every time.
Same thing every saying all that. It's a nice problem to have when you're growing at 10, 20%.
Definitely. Definitely. Look, David, finally, you have been involved with a lot of FMCG businesses. What would you say are the biggest changes that you've seen over your career so far in terms of customer behaviour and changing expectations and needs?
Transformed. Anybody who remembers shopping 30 years ago, like I do, would just be it's hard to imagine if you went back in time and said, you never guess what it's going to be like in 30 years' time.
I know.
So there's always change. I'm not saying there's not. So kind of, you have to be, so that's changed. I won't come to what you have to be. So that's changed. Things are much more global and international now.
Sure.
I'm always amazed what you can buy from Asia and get delivered within a week, for example, good and bad, so much more global. And because the supply chains responded and become more global, it means it is under more risks. Anybody just needs to watch the news to see what that means, or have experienced shortages during the COVID pandemic to understand, what a global supply chain, positives and negatives around it. That's been transformed. The way we handle data and the way we use systems is completely transformed as well. And the things we can now get visibility on, analyze and make decisions on would be inconceivable when I started in the industry. So saying all that, the good news is, everything we take for granted in the supply chain today was once a controversial innovation or idea.
Definitely.
So it's like, it's okay. Guys, girls, it's okay. But have an open mind as well, especially in supply chain. Have an open mind, because it's going to hit you hard and it's going to be coming over the hill always. So have that, it's a bit going back to what you said, have that operational stability mindset, but then have that innovation. We're going to have to change things, so let's get ready to change things mindset and get them to kind of play together nicely.
David, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure to speak to you today on such an interesting and challenging topic. Thanks a lot for all of the insights and learning, and thank you, listeners, for tuning in and sticking around till the end. I hope you found the conversation as insightful and valuable as I did. Please stay tuned for the next episode. Let us know what you would like us to cover, and don't forget to subscribe on our website or on your go-to podcast app. Until next time, bye for now.